let's move on to 3 early NBA season stunners: the good, the bad. We'll take out the ugly um, of this season. But I'll hand it off to you. I'll flip it over, tip it off. You can start.
Awesome. So I'm going to go with the Cleveland Cavs. Now, not as shocking to yours truly as if you heard on our preview show, which hopefully you did because you're subscribed to us. But if you're a new listener, you didn't hear it. I thought the Cavs will end up finishing in second or third. I just really like that they re-signed their core players with Mobley and Mitchell. They're bringing back a team that had a lot of cohesion, and I think a lot of the times, as we'll probably talk about with some of the teams that aren't doing so well, chemistry is important and continuity is important. Now, granted, as we're recording this, the Cavs are 12-0 and they're first in the East. Obviously, no one expected them to start off that hot. But the last team that started this late unbeaten were the 15-16 Warriors, who we all know, broke the single season win mark with 63 wins that year. And in the last 30 years, And then the only other teams that did that were, the 96-97 Bulls and the 02-03 Mavs with, young Dirk, young Steve Nash, and Michael Finley. So then they're pretty good company. Not saying that they're going to have the success of, those Warriors or Bulls teams. That Dallas team, unfortunately, they were knocked out early. But Cleveland, very hot start. I don't think really anybody expected that with all this, the talk of the Sixers and the Knicks, Celtics, obviously, even the Bucks, Pacers. Nobody talked about Cleveland.
I think I got to put my hand up. I was one that said I doubt on Cleveland just because I wasn't a Kenny Atkinson fan. But it sounds like Atkinson really learned, from the Golden State Warriors as an assistant coach behind Steve Kerr to utilize those guards more in spacing. If you look at it with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and even Chris Paul, the former year. I feel like you got to acknowledge that the growth of Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, especially this season where you're seeing it, they're game changers and they're hitting clutch shots and they're becoming more mature on the court together as a tandem versus last year with Bickerstaff where it kind of became, a nitpick type of year where it's my ball or your ball and it's, my turn basketball. So I think they're learning to play complementary basketball in the backcourt. And Kenny Atkinson, I feel like, learned a lot with the Golden State Warriors under Steve Kerr. So kudos to Cleveland for making their name known this year. And they won't be 73-9 like the Golden State Warriors, but they'll be a threat in the top 2, top 3 at this point. With the success that they're having and the depth that they have. So I really like that pick. For me, it's Peyton Pritchard. I think. We think of Jaylen Brown and we think of Tatum and we think of Derek White, Drew Holiday. You really don't think of the supporting cast when it comes to the bench guys, right? And I really think when Brad Stevens signed him to the 4-year, $30 million contract, I think he was hoping that Pritchard would take this leap and really relish that role. I think a lot of people look at it and say, well, when you're coming off the bench, you're not going to play as much minutes. He's averaging 28 and a half minutes per game. So I don't think minutes is an issue. And down the stretch, you can have a three guard set. You can play Drew Holiday, Derek White, and Pritchard and, have Tatum and Brown in at the same time. You can mix and match. And one thing that Peyton Pritchard has becoming relevant to is, yes, the big threes. He's shooting 33% from half court, I believe the number is, which is absolutely insane when you think about it. And I really think that Pritchard's taken a huge leap. He's averaging 16.2 points, 3 assists, and 3 rebounds, like I said, with 28 minutes per game. But I think when Tatum and Brown are kind of feeling out, the surface on the court, I think that's when Pritchard can go off because all eyes are on them, right? And it's just having that capability to shoot the 3 ball at a very extremely high clip. I can see Pritchard, if you're looking at the odds for 6 man, he's got to be up there. And going into the year, I kind of thought, well, he might average 10 to 12 points per game, but he's taken that role and he's running with it. And guess what? He's being aggressive with his shot selection, and he's not getting any ifs, ands, or buts from Tatum and Brown. If Missoula's saying shoot the ball as much as you want because you are the one of the best shooters on this team, whether people like it or not. So Pritchard could be up for Sixth Man of the Year. I'm just saying.
And while obviously, I'm a Lakers fan, I'm not a big, I'm not one to really boast about the Celtics in any way. But Peyton Pritchard does hold the soft spot in my heart. Going back to his days in Oregon, where I'm watching the late night Thursday night, Pac-12 games with Bill Walton calling it, and having a little action. Obviously that's why I'm watching it that late.
Yeah.
But Peyton Pritchard was an absolute dog for that Oregon team. Many a times they were, in that spot on like ESPN2 or whatever, ESPN,
Fox Sports.
whatever, Fox, yeah, whatever it was on. Yep. Definitely enjoyed watching Peyton Pritchard. Not surprised he's had this success. He was a lights out shooter from what I remember in college. He was just a playmaker, a guy who was always around the ball. Honestly, when the Celtics got him, I'm like, this is going to be a perfect fit, and I hate it. And it's worked out. Funny that he was the talk of like trade conversations early in his career.
He was
about him being like, hey, we got too many guards. Get rid of Peyton Pritchard. And now he's obviously in such a huge role for them off the bench. So
yeah,
good for him. I don't want to, I'm not a Celtics guy, but I'd like to see Peyton Pritchard having the success that he is. I'm going to go with another individual who's, and we talk about 3-point shooting, a guy who's really improved his 3-point shooting, Ant-Man, Anthony Edwards. He's increased his 3-point shooting so far by 8% this early in the year. He was just a tick around like 38% last year for the season and only averaging a little over 2 made threes a game. Right now, he's at 45% and averaging over 5 made threes a game. So obviously it's good to see somebody put in the work. Everyone looked at Ant-Man as, obviously he's a dog, but they look at him as also a guy who is a slasher, with the dunks, and obviously he embarrassed a lot of people, putting people on posters over the course of his career so far, last year included. So it's good to see him take his game to the next level. While he was a streaky shooter, as we saw last season, he obviously worked on his perimeter game, and it's yielding results. For him personally, the team's obviously struggling a little bit more than people thought with their adjustment, losing Towns. They're working Randall in. And we talked about it ourselves as we thought that was going to really hurt them. So far it is, but we'll see. Ant-Man obviously has really improved his game, and it's just good to see great players, especially so young. He's not resting on what he's done or the hype. He's improving his game, and it's good to see.
Yeah, and I think with Ant-Man, if you look at the 3-point shooting, he has to take more 3-pointers. He doesn't have the flexibility of dishing it out to Karl Anthony Towns anymore. And we mentioned it as you just alluded to, but like it's factual evidence. Julius Randle does not move the ball. He just doesn't. So when that ball becomes sticky, guess what? Ant-Man has to become the hero when the shot clock's down to 6, right? Yeah. So you have to find a way to get the ball moving, and Ant-Man is becoming a prolific shooter, as you mentioned. And yes, he's explosive. He has the Olympic pedigree. And if you look at the capability of Ant-Man, yes, he can be like a Kawhi Leonard type where he can play both sides of the ball extremely well. But if he includes the 3-point shooting, I mean, he's up there with Tatum in my eyes. So I really think highly of him. But he's in a tough situation. I think Minnesota can probably look at the trade deadline and maybe get rid of Randall because I just think he is becoming like a very, sticky figure on that court where, again, if the ball goes in his hands, it's not going back to you. It's just not. So you just kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. Warriors are off to a very, very hot start at 9-2. Now, I'm going to put a caveat in this because they've only really defeated the Celtics in Boston and they beat the Thunder, which the Thunder are number 1 in the West. Let's not say that's not 2 really good wins. But if you look at the other side of the schedule, it's like the Pelicans, yes, without DeJounte Murray. They play the Clippers without Kawhi Leonard. Norman Powell's having a great year, but you kind of look at that team and you say they're 9-2, but will it last? And you would think without Klay Thompson, with him going to Dallas, that could have had immediate impact when it comes to player development, especially with the young guys that they have, right? If you look at Kaminga's a bona fide shooter. Podolski is a really good shooter, but he can't find his way, at least coming off the bench. Buddy, he's averaging like 9 points. I can see him getting up to 15, hopefully by the end of the year. Buddy Hield shooting lights out, 47% from three, which is absolutely ridiculous. But I think you have to look at the bigger picture with the Warriors. Steph Curry's 35 years old. Draymond Green's up there. And so how much is left in that tank? And I think it's close to empty. So why not invest as much as you can in Steph Curry right now? And a big thing for me, if we were to play, a huge trade at the deadline, it's Chris Middleton. I think that the Bucks, if they are this bad moving forward, which they have not proved defensively that they can keep up, they can only score points. I believe right now that if Chris Middleton comes back and he's healthy, even if he's not healthy up until the trade deadline, I can see the Golden State Warriors possibly offering a package, as Milwaukee has said, through talks, that they are willing to trade pieces away. Now, is Middleton one of those pieces? Probably. And that's why I think Golden State Warriors could be licking their chops and looking at Milwaukee as a trade partner and possibly looking at Middleton and stealing him away.
Yeah, that's a great point, and kind of touches on two teams there too with the Warriors, and then the Bucks. And we both said that the Bucks, we did not expect them to be one of the top teams in the East. I think you mentioned maybe sixth place or seventh place, and obviously they have not even it's very early in the year, but they have not looked good, and they are very much in jeopardy with this horrendous start of not even making the play-in game.
No,
but I got to go hands up here. As you did with Cleveland, I did not think the Warriors would be very good this season. I thought there was a lot of, obviously losing Klay Thompson was going to be huge to that locker room, but also Steph Curry at his age and Draymond Green at his age. It's early in the year, and obviously they've come up very strong, but I just don't know if they hold up over the course of the season. But I think the West is wide open, as we've alluded to in the preview episode.
Yep.
So going all in while Steph is continuing to play at a high level, we saw in the Olympics he was outstanding. Literally carried the USA in that gold medal game down the stretch. So,
top three guard of all time. Top three guard.
Yeah, there's no question. So I have, for my last surprise of the year, and once again, for me, maybe not as a surprise because I did have him as my pick to make it in the NBA Finals against your Boston Celtics. But the Phoenix Suns, they are also off to a very hot start, currently tied for first out West with the Thunder. I really think they've benefited, as I talked about in their offseason additions, adding some guards, and Tyus Jones has been the steady hand at the helm so far for them, and it has allowed KD and Booker and Beal to fit in their more natural roles. Beal just went down with an injury, so they're going to have to work through that. But overall, their depth has been a lot better. We've seen it with their bench. And then Booker and Durant are just playing really well together on the offensive side of the ball. Now that Booker doesn't have to play point, or when Booker wasn't comfortable with that, we even saw KD at times bringing it up last year. It's just they were experimenting so much. And now with Tyus Jones, they really have a true point guard who's very smart. He doesn't turn the ball over. He doesn't care if he gets his shots. He'll take his open looks. It's been a very natural fit, and they're off to a really good start. And you're seeing them click more than they did obviously a year ago. And we talk, like I said, time, cohesion, continuity. These are all big things that sometimes get lost in that. We saw with the Miami Heat when they had their big three. Obviously they didn't win their first year. And they fell short. Obviously the Mavs upset them. But it takes time to figure things out, especially late in games where, as we know in the NBA, everything seems